I think we live in a world of, in some cases, superficial relationships. The danger in giving people advice is if you're not careful, it's a narcissistic trait. Now, debriefing is the backbone for therapy. When someone has gone through traumatic events, there's a need to what we define emotionally vomit. The reason we mess up is because we as human beings are not very good listeners. We end up taking whatever they're expressing and we basically get them to shove it back down. They re-internalize it. We can beg and borrow from the debriefing model to really be good communicators, to create space for people.
You had talked, with your dad later about this kind of emotional vomiting that, at first it was extremely difficult, but then later it's like, well, shit, he trusts me enough, vulnerable enough that he's going to
Let it
get
out.
it all out. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I have 3 daughters and I've worked really hard over the last couple of years to be in that thinking, just listen, don't
Right.
solve, don't ask questions, don't interrupt,
Right.
just let them talk it out.
Yeah. So my ex-partner taught me this. He was a clinical psychologist. And, part of the story that I left out was when my father passed, I'm now searching for a father figure. So I meet this guy. He's a clinical psychologist from South Africa, moved to Canada, who also teaches ego states. And I'm like, look at what the universe has brought. Wow. Let's get into a partnership. Anyway, it was like an 8-month marriage. It sort of fizzled out before it even got started. And I appreciate what he brought to me in my life. I mean, the way it ended, which was him, which wasn't the most, it was a little shady and it wasn't the most kosher things that he did. But, I looked at that as an opportunity, which was back to failure, which was like, this wasn't a failure. This was a great lesson. And I got a lot. And he taught me this model called debriefing. Now, debriefing is the backbone for therapy. Debriefing is when someone has gone through traumatic events or severe events or challenging moments and situations, there's a need to what we define emotionally vomit or express or talk through that. The problem is, in a lot of cases, we as human beings are not very good listeners, right?
Right.
Specifically, if we're parents or spouses, the first thing we want to do is solve problems and give them advice and tell them what to do. And the reality is most people don't need that, right? Most people just need the space to communicate and to share uninterrupted without being judged, without being criticized, without being minimized, without being fixed and advised and interrupted. But once again, we as human beings can't stop ourselves sometimes, right? And so as a friend coming to you and saying, oh, I'm going through a challenging marriage, you're like, oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about. And what happens is when we do this, we end up taking whatever they're expressing and we basically get them to shove it back down. They re-internalize it. Now, one of the biggest challenges with us as human beings is we go through something called unexpressed emotion and unexpressed stress, right? So, males, we do this a lot because we've been taught and conditioned to do this, right? Like, father used to say, I'll give you something to cry about. And I was like, oh boy, let me swallow that one down, right? Or, you go to a buddy and they say, come on, stop being so sensitive, right? Like, grow the hell up, right? Pull up your big boy pants type of stuff. So when people have gone through, again, from a therapy standpoint, when you're giving them an environment to be able to debrief and talk their scenarios through, they're able to reprocess that event as the adult ego state. Because when they're going through the trauma or the severe event or the challenge, they're going through it as the child, the feeling side of our personality, right? So divorce is an example, bankruptcy, death, health, all the big things. Now, what do we know about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is someone who has gone through a severe event? If they've been debriefed within a certain period of time, their ability to process that event as the adult contributes to them not ending up with PTSD.
Because my wife was kidnapped, so I've
Yeah.
lived with someone with PTSD, but what
Correct.
is the time that they have to do this?
They say within 6 months of the event.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that you can't debrief years later through it, but it's a longer process. And debriefing truly isn't a one-time conversation. It's a period of time that you debrief through. But there are 4 stages to debriefing. Stage number 1, let the individual tell you their story. This is why we go to therapists and coaches. And the good coaches, they shut up. The bad coaches, the bad therapists, they start interrupting and talking, right? And this is where it all goes wrong, right? Because I mean, let's go to your wife. Went through this event. The first thing you want to do is you want to take that pain away from her. You want to help her feel better. You don't want her to feel this way and experience that way. So you start, the stuff falling out of your mouth right now is, oh, I get it, babe, and I hear you, babe, and it's okay, babe, and you're safe now, babe, and blah 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 blah. And your wife doesn't go, oh, there, Charlie, this is why I married you. You are so wise, and thank you very much, right? um, or a buddy's going through a big business challenge, right? And you're like, all right, bud, like, here's what you got to do. And they don't go, oh, wise friend, thank you very much for giving me your advice. That makes me feel better, right? They're like, fuck, man, like, it feels like you haven't listened to me. This is a joke I often say when I'm sitting on planes. I wear the hat where it says making humans better humans. And I'm like, do people know what I do for a living? Because people just like, I take my headphones off and they're like, and I go, oh, here's a debriefing moment, right? So step one, let them tell their story. Now, the reason we mess up step one is because when we listen to people, we listen to them through 4 different quadrants. The first quadrant we tend to listen to people through is through the ears of what is called criticism and judgment. We judge their feelings. We criticize their decisions. We judge their experience. And what that does is it takes it and shoves it back down. And we can say to you, it doesn't even have to be harsh in the way we say it. We could just say, like, come on, bro. Like well, you're making a big deal out of this. Like, relax. The world's not ending, right? And that doesn't help. The second thing we do, and this is usually with family, with kids and with spouses, is we minimize things. So the kid's gone through a negative experience and we go, don't worry about it, right? Tomorrow's a new day. Everything will be fine. You're so lucky to be who you are. Now, your kid doesn't go, oh, wise parent, thank you so much for telling me that. I now feel better, right? Because we haven't let them process and debrief. The third thing we do is we problem solve. For guys, I call you mechanics. We've got a tool
Yep,
for
that's me.
everything.
That's me.
We're like, all right, here's what we got to do. We got to fix it. And this is step 1, step 2, step 3, right?
Yeah.
Ladies, we call you advice monsters, right? And I often say this to people. I say, the danger in giving people advice is if you're not careful, it's a narcissistic trait. And people kind of look at me and they go, well, what do you mean? I'm not a narcissist. And I go, well, how good does it feel when you give someone advice and they listen to you and they take the advice and they come back to you and they go, by the way, I took your advice and it worked. You're like, of course it worked. I'm a superhero. I wouldn't have given you the bad advice. So it feels good to give people advice. And in the world that I'm in, which is coaching and facilitation and training, we got to be careful because we are facing people's challenges every single day, right? In the role that you're in as well, right? With R360, a lot of
Yeah.
people are coming with their challenges and their stories. Now, it's not that people don't need advice and we don't need to sort of help them minimize things or judge. We just do it too soon. We got to wait. And the fourth way we tend to listen is we listen through the ears of what is called interruption, which is as people are telling us the story, we're jumping in and we're adding in and all that kind of stuff. So step 1 for debriefing, let people tell their story. And if we could not end up listening that way, the do's are create a safe space, let them talk uninterrupted, encourage them to share more. And this is where, if you're really good, you facilitate their conversation by asking them questions, detailed based questions, which now brings us to stage 2. Stage 2 is called mining the details. Now, what mining the details is when we're asking them specific questions to go through their story again, and we're asking them to recount that story. So I usually give the example of someone getting in a car accident, right? So someone gets in a car accident and they go, I don't want to drive on highways, or I don't want to drive at night anymore. You let them tell the story. Now you get some ideas. So you say, look, we call this the rite of passage question. Can I ask you some questions about your story? Someone says, yes. So tell me, what kind of car were you driving? What direction were you heading in? When you got in the accident, what was the other car? What time of night was this? And they're able to share the story, but through more specific details, which by definition is the adult ego state. They're processing and thinking through that as an analytical, more objective side versus the feeling side. Stage 3 for debriefing is called normalize their experience or normalize their feelings, which is if someone, for example, says, I don't want to drive at night, by definition, this is a stage where you say, listen, that's normal, right? If I had gotten in an accident on a highway at nighttime, I would also be really scared to drive. In other words, what this now does, this stage of debriefing, is it takes someone from the island of the silo, them being sort of this unique by themselves person, which has gone through this unique experience and brings them back to the village, right? So it's normal. Divorce. I don't ever want to get married again. I would. That's normal. I mean, to go through that kind of experience and to not want to get divorced, not want to get married again, is a very normal
Yeah.
feeling to that, right? Going bankrupt. I don't ever want to start a business again. Well, I could see by going through that experience how normal it is for us to be uncertain, unsure, or scared to start a business. Again, this isn't like we do one, two, three, four, right? And it's in one conversation. This is over a series of a period of time. And really good therapists do this. Now, for the audience, we're not suggesting that we become therapists for our families and for severe events. Like we need to call and and get professionals in depending on the severe event. Like what happened to your wife, you can support the debriefing process
How you show up influences the final outcome.
1,000%. And this final stage of debriefing is something called restoration and reorganization, R&R. And what that basically means is that someone restores back to normality. So I'm willing to get back in the car again and I reorganize. I'm able to maybe drive the car on a different route and, at a different time, right? It's really where the adult now sort of takes place. And it's a very successful process for helping people go through trauma. Now, we might go through in life micro traumas, like our kids, like,
Yeah.
getting denied for a job or getting fired, or kid loses a soccer game, or, spouse has a big fallout with a friend. We can beg and borrow from the debriefing model and utilize that to really be good communicators, to create space for people. Recently, again, I was telling you about the plane. I took my headphones off and the woman next to me, she's like, "Hi, what's your name?" I'm like, "Oh, here we go." She's like, I'm Greg. And she's like, "Oh, so Costa Rica, blah, 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 chat, chat, chat." And the next thing, story about her business, story about how she's a hairdresser. She's divorced. She's raising the kids by herself. She's coming to Costa Rica. She's thinking about moving here. She's thinking about selling her business. And I'm, interesting, right? And I'm listening and listening and listening and listening and listening and listening, because the interesting thing about this whole thing that we've just discussed, we will share some of our most intimate details of our life to a complete stranger instead of to our family, to our spouses, to our kids, to our parents, because in some cases it's easier to talk to a stranger.
You're about making humans better. What's your simplest definition of better human, and why do so many people struggle to become one? Because it's common sense.
It is common sense. All right. So the foundation for being a better human is today I messed up, but tomorrow I'm going to do different. So that's sort of the foundational piece, which is as a human being, I get to make a mistake. I get to fail. I get to not do it well today. The success of being a better human is making a different choice and taking a different action tomorrow. My father used to say this: there is no refund on yesterday, but there is choice and decision tomorrow. So if we can live to that, which is I'm able to do it differently tomorrow, there we go. Now, the pillars of this, what anchors us or what gives us anchorage to that, are the same pillars of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, and relational management. So am I aware enough of my personality, right? Which I know where to shift and change or to adapt. Can I moderate and regulate that side of my personality? And can I influence and impact people in a positive way, which is the relational management? If I could do those three things and do it differently tomorrow, this would be my definition of being a better human. In fact, my new book is titled, I'm not sure if it's 50 things to be a better human or 37 things to be a better human, but I'm in the midst of writing it now.
Well, I'd like to help you with the title. That's one of my superpowers, but we can go there later. Your style, Greg, it blends psychology, street smarts, and brutal honesty. Why do you think that kind of no BS approach resonates so deeply with people? Because I've seen you in action.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think the majority of people and these sort of interactions and worlds that we live in is somewhat ulterior and false. People aren't always willing to tell us that we have a piece of spinach in our face. I use that analogy a lot. I'm like, how many times have you sat at a table with someone, they got a piece of food on their face and you don't say something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've learned now that if you really are friends, you'll have that deep conversation. But what I've learned to do that really facilitates that is I say, hey, Greg, do you mind if or would you give me permission to take you a little
Hmm.
bit deeper on this? And I'll wait.
Yep.
And if you give me the permission, then it's a much better conversation than if I just give you unsolicited advice or push you in a direction that you don't particularly want to go,
Yeah.
even though we have a good relationship.
Yeah. We might argue the other side of that coin is people are selfish and
Yeah.
we've got our own stuff to deal with. So we don't always truly stretch and extend ourselves in ways that we should. It's hard. It's hard to be honest. It's hard to show for others. We've got our own challenges and stresses that keep us up and keep our mind occupied. And back to the question, which is why, again, I think we live in a world of, in some cases, superficial relationships. We need to, this is where they say if you could count your friends in one hand, that's a solid group, right?